Jack McEnany, the county historian.
Paul Stewart from Underground Railroad Education Center.
Mark Jones with Gilliland, is a small businessman in the Gilliland area.
Connor Murphy, I'm with the Albany County Legislature. I'm filling in for Pat Cronin today.
I'm Jeff Burley. I'm a county legislator from Altamont and Knox.
Brian Fessler. I'm in Colony, and I work for the State School Boards Association.
Rebecca Kennedy, Majority Counsel for the Albany County Legislature.
I'm Jennifer Dorsey. I'm a professor of history at Siena College, and I work in the Revolutionary era and run a publicly funded program for public history.
Great. Well, we have not officially or like internally constituted ourselves such to approve minutes and sort of conduct the meeting. I would suggest that we await the full complement of our group till we do that, until with Rebecca's help, and kind of run the meeting ad hoc until we get the full complement. Along those lines, we did reach out to the town historians in New Scotland and Bethlehem, neither of which felt that they had either the time to participate. But as a fallback, we contacted the historian from the town of Queens, Joseph Bolke, and apparently he is interested. So we did receive his resume that I'll just circulate that around. And correct me if I'm wrong, the organization was such that we would have the appointees appointed by the legislative and county leaders, and then 2 persons with particular expertise or association from the historical community. Is that an accurate characterization? Of which Jen has happily agreed to serve in one of those seats, and the objective is to fill the other, basically by the committee. Has anyone heard any other candidate or have any other ideas relative to that last seat?
Question. So there are town historical societies in all of the towns, and in cases where the town historian cannot participate, what if going to that next level? Would that make sense, or is that something we can do?
Sure, we could. I think the idea of from the last meeting of focusing on New Scotland and Bethlehem was we wanted representation from the southern part of the county, which Queens sort of fits that bill.
You'd also do double duty for the hill towns.
Right, that's right. So I think certainly if this, I would suggest that we sort of initially went to the town historians. Certainly, if town historian in the southern part of the county. If we can't find someone there, then I think your idea is a good one to then, okay, let's focus on the historical societies from the southern part of the county.
And just a point of clarification, there are actually 3 open commission spots. Jen Dorsey has filled 1, so there are 2 remaining.
Okay.
Is there anybody here from Cohoes, Waterville, or Green Island?
I read the minutes and I misunderstood. I was supposed to reach out to Van Schaik, but then I remember we had the email where I was like, do I hold? Do I wait till Jen? Okay. So I can still make that, and that would fit Cohoes. I just misunderstood my next step there.
Is there a sense that sort of the residents of the gateway communities, would they view a representative from Van Schaik as representing?
I would think them? So. It's also very revolutionary.
Sure. Well, do we want to clarify from the last meeting then to make a sense of the group that we should specifically reach out to Van Schaik for that last seat? I think certainly geographic representation that would fit the bill.
And their representative is already involved in the Lafayette 250 or the 50th anniversary that Lafayette came and visited us all in 1820, 24, and 25. And they're starting early on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that'll be September 17th.
Yeah.
Any other ideas, suggestions, inputs, candidates, regions?
What's her name? It's always at a, although she doesn't live in, she doesn't live in,
Well,
doesn't live in that area.
I would then
That's-
suggest
that's
that we
right.
perhaps move to accept Mr. Volke's candidacy for the 7th seat. Do we want to await the discussion with Van Schaik, or could we make it, assuming that they are interested, that they would fill the 8th seat? Is that
Well, I
appropriate?
think we ought to reach out to one of the municipal historians at the same time.
Okay. Okay.
There's usually an active group there in Cohoes.
Okay. Well, why don't we then have,
I just had a thought.
Sure.
It's city representative again, but maybe somebody from Friends of Schuyler? Is there somebody, because Schuyler Mansion seems to be like they're Albany, kind of a heart for what's happening with 250. But it does bring us more city representation, so I don't know balance-wise.
You'd want them also to live in the city too, I would think,
Well, we're
right
county.
in the county, yeah.
I mean, my sense is we'll wind up working very closely with Schuyler, hopefully, in whatever we do.
Okay.
I think the ability to reflect the full geographic scope of the county is, to me at least,
Yeah.
a paramount.
And I think everybody should be at least an Albany County resident.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, why don't I split it up then and make two different motions? One to accept the interest and candidacy of Mr. Bulkey, the town historian in Queens, for the 7th. And then I'll make another motion to specifically ask or designate Maeve to reach out to the both the city historian in Cohoes. Would that be your
Yeah.
suggestion? And
Is there a second for the motion to accept the candidacy of Joseph Bulkey?
I'll second.
I guess I'm going to do it.
Yeah, go
All
ahead.
in favor?
You're the appropriate one.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, passes, and I don't think you need a motion for the second.
Okay.
thing.
Then we'll just ask Maeve to
Yeah.
reach out to
And
him.
Van Schaik would do double duty as DAR. So they're a DAR site, the Daughters of the American Revolution, so.
Great. Great. Well, again, since we're not formally constituted in terms of how we're going to run our meetings, I think our last meeting was a good one, though not necessarily formal. Following that same sort of framework, certainly open it up to what people feel we'd like to accomplish in this session. Again, building towards the full complement of the group before we sort of take concrete official acts. As for me personally, I would love to dive a little deeper into what resources we may have at our disposal, both financial and personnel, to affect whatever it is we decide we would like to do in terms of a plan, and then also dive a little deeper as to what we would like that plan to be, because obviously the two sort of one informs the other. There's a symbiotic relationship between what we want to do and how we would like to pay for it, and how much money we think we can have, and therefore what we can do.
I think it's easier to, we've had a couple of good models, and one was the tricentennial of the city charter that Tom Whalen had for one solid year, and got a tremendous amount of contributions from private businesses. There's a lot of subcommittees and things like that going on. This is very different because we can't do this in 1 year. We have to do it over several years, and it's already starting with the Lafayette celebration is actually starting in 24. You know, you could say, well, we do it we'd start with Concord and Lexington, which is 75, but you know, they're ahead of us. And it's starting right away, and it will continue in theory all the way up to 83. And some areas, some groups in our area For example, Saratoga is heavy into the Knox trek when all the cannons were brought through our county. So it's our thing to celebrate. That's going to happen anyway. And then for the Battle of Saratoga, the turning point of the American Revolution, that should be a national celebration, which should be well beyond the borders here of New York State. It's easier, it's hard to raise money generically, you know, for a commission or something like that, or a commemoration. It is easier sometimes to take specifics. Now, I was looking at some of the things that I have from the 200th anniversary, which is the second one I was going to mention, and that's our predecessor 50 years ago, and that was the bicentennial, which was on the overall very, very successful. It had a parade, it had a number of things, but I noticed it also had a publication, a paperback publication, said Albany in the American Revolution. And it was cheap, and it was paper, and it was, I think, 5.5 by 7 or something like that. It's a type thing that if we could produce something like that, whenever we consider a good time to start it out, and it has the time schedule of all the events that go on throughout this celebration, that should be given to every school children. Maeve was saying that traditional 4th grade local history is now starting in the 3rd grade.
No, so I just had a
Yeah.
meeting with the schools here. Rev War is still 4th grade.
It's still 4th grade.
Yeah,
okay.
4th and 5th grade.
Well, it would be nice to give every child something that they could take for free. And I suspect it's the type of thing that you would have somebody willing to pay for that, both in the corporate sense and in the governmental sense. And I think we ought to think about that. I don't make a decision right now, but that's something that reaches every household, hopefully every child.
So I actually just had a meeting with some representatives from the schools before I came up here. Their broader idea is about having specific district, like every child in the schools gets a field trip. So like every 3rd grader takes the same as every 4th grader. And then I started asking a little bit about Revolutionary War. But you know, these are some programming that they are starting to look for funding for. So that was a possible thing as well, is figuring out, you know, is it also field trips? Is it building itineraries? Is it something like that would get people out and about? And for the schools, you know, their asks are things like they might need help with busing, right? Funding busing.
Yeah.
So if we knew what was upcoming, like we know that, we don't know, but like I would be shocked if the Albany Institute didn't have an exhibit kind of cooking that they're thinking of. So if we knew that there was an anchor program and something like that to get the schools out to the programming, you know, that's just something that's already being investigated. And I think we have possibly a mechanism where people can come to us for funding. Like we're thinking of a grant program, if I understand.
What school group is this?
This is the Albany School District.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder if is there statewide?
Well, so then, right, and that's when we
Yeah.
start to think bigger. It's like, okay, if the Albany schools are thinking of this, you know, are these itineraries things we can replicate wider? You know, so something, because I went to the New York State Tourism Association meeting, so I talked to other places and what they're doing for 250. You know, Saratoga, I mean, they're looking to 1777, right? That's going to be their big push. So, which will also push our programming, right? So if they're putting the bulk of their 1777, you know, so if we start kind of piloting these itineraries, getting people out, and making them evergreen enough to push out to something, you know, the next year, the year after.
Well, I think you both sort of touched on a couple of themes that we discussed at the last meeting, which is good. One, certainly timing. I remember, and I don't know if it's to what extent it's reflected in the minutes, but we definitely did talk about 1777 being an appropriate focus for us as well as it is in Saratoga. as well as it having the benefit of buying us a little more time, right, an extra year. But I think, Jack, you also make a good point. I mean, the historical fact of the matter is that, you know, things really got cooking in Albany County in 1780, 1781. I mean, that's when what had been sort of a civil conflict really became a civil war. So, you know, if the counties, I don't think we put a time frame or a sunset on the legislation. So, I mean, certainly from a historical point of view, it would not be inappropriate to have to 1783 or at least 1781 be kind of within our scope.
In retrospect, having gone through the last commission, they concentrated on the Declaration of Independence, which meant everything seemed to go around 76.
Yeah. And then once that was done, it was done.
I think that would be a mistake.
I totally agree with you. Anyone else have any thoughts about that?
I just have a question. I'm wondering, what was the original legislative mandate for the commission?
It ends, to be clear, in 2033.
Good.
So it automatically terminates that.
Okay. So we did envision that.
No, I mean,
full scope.
what was the, did they have what was their charge to us?
Do you have it?
I do. Charge yourself, empowered, okay, authorized to take any and all actions necessary to promote the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution in Albany County, subject to available funding, that they be empowered to conclude a memorandum of understanding with Discover Albany for the purposes of accepting grant applications and making recommendations for said grants to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and that they act as an organizing resource for various cities, towns, and villages throughout the county as they plan related to commemoration events.
It's pretty broad.
Pretty broad.
Yeah.
And definitely, now, thank you for sharing that, reminded that we did envision the scope being the fullness of the whole revolutionary period, which is good. I think you also touched on some other things from the last meeting, for the lack of a better term, that we could call sort of pillars of the effort. School kids. I do think we talked about that as being one of the things we wanted to really focus on, and also legacy. What will be left when this project is done? And I totally agree with you about a written product. Maybe modify it a little bit. Is that one way to get a really valid written product is to, and I'll defer to you, Jennifer, your expertise in this, is to sort of put out a call or organize, within our confines, organize some sort of symposium or what have you, and ask the scholars and others to contribute on topics that we would choose, right, and then perhaps combine them. I think I referenced there's a great little publication, World of the Founders, but it was a byproduct of the 200th anniversary of the Constitution in 1989, and it was at the state level, and it was just a nice little paperback with 7 or 8 essays on various topics that were all really interesting. I'd never seen sort of aggregated before, but that produced. Now it's not necessarily geared towards a school age audience, so I think that's also a great idea. But certainly, I would feel that we would want to leave behind something that in 40 years, if someone goes to the Bethlehem Library, there's something on the shelf that shows our work.
I have a communication question, because sometimes, just because we're the Tourism Bureau, we get emails from folks who are like, I have an idea for 250, or I want to do this. So, like a recent one was an artist reached out and has an idea for a mural, and the people, I think I emailed it yesterday at the end of the day, but when those kind of pop-up things come up where somebody says, I'm an author, or I'm an artist, and I want to do something for the 250, should I write the whole commission? Should I send it to Patrick to put on the agenda for next time? Because there's these like little pop-up things that come up, and I'm not sure how to make sure everybody's...
I'm curious, when they reach out to you, are they looking for, like, are they reaching out to notify you? Are they looking to help you promote their
they want
programming?
more funding to make it happen.
Funding to achieve the goal.
Yeah. So, but there was one, like folks, it was a weaving group who, you know, they have a tapestry and it's going to Revolutionary
Yeah.
War sites, and I think I sent that one to you.
Yeah.
And I connected them with Skylar, so that was good, but, you know, those are the type of things when somebody's like, oh, we're looking for funding to do something this is, you know, I'm just curious how we would want, you know, I don't want to clog everybody's emails for something that's, yes.
Is it possible to create like some sort of clearinghouse where you could connect host sites? Like you just said, you sent the Weavers to Skylar, but I imagine there might be all kinds of community institutions that want to host programming but don't have anything like original or
Yeah.
anything. They don't have the money or the time to create programming, but if you could connect creators with host sites, you might,
Yeah.
does that make sense?
Yeah, and I guess that's what I would like, since we have this group, right? Would it be something I would send to the whole group, or is it something I would send to Patrick to put on the agenda to discuss for the next meeting? I guess that's what these little, like, these tiny opportunities that come up, that could be the legacy program. Like a piece of art's pretty cool, you know, but,
I mean, I like the idea of putting it as a specific item so that it gets its due, and maybe when you send it to
Yeah.
Patrick, you could CC us, and to the
Right.
extent that, you know, we have the time to, between meetings, to look it over. It
okay.
wouldn't be a bad
As long
thing.
as everything, like I said, I'm hesitant to clog people's emails, so I wanna.
No.
To piggyback on Jeff's ideas here, and I'm thinking along a pillar, I'm thinking how do we engage the community, which is otherwise unengaged for the most part. I'm thinking Van Schaik Island, Battle of Normanskill, Battle of Saratoga obviously is a no-brainer, but, and again, I missed the first meeting, so I'm trying to get caught up in terms of exactly what our time frame is here. Are we dealing just with 2026 and we have 1 year to get this done? Or as obviously, as we just discussed, we've got more time than that. But my backyard is the Battle of Normanskill. And I love the fact that I drive by the sign, but that's it, it's a sign. And I've always thought there should be more. There should be more to get the community engaged and to understand the importance, even though it was a small battle, but it was important. Van Schaik Island is an amazing place, but it's not quite what it could or should be. And it doesn't engage the community. They don't really know the historical importance of Van Schaik Island. I think that's something that this committee should work on in the next year or so, to get those more oomph.
Yeah, another,
And even if it's temporary, but it shouldn't be. It should be.
there's a couple things on my mind. One is I'm hooked into a couple other groups that are doing things on the American Revolution, and it's almost always about battles.
Right.
And I would really like to see something that focuses on personalities, that tells individual people's stories, because I think that, you know, battles are, you know, they're important, but.
The Battle of Normanskill,
You know.
while it was relatively insignificant, but the story behind it is more important.
Yeah.
The story is amazing.
Yeah.
It's a great story.
Where would I read the story now?
Well, you can find little blurbs on the, that's just it. It's hard.
Exactly, yeah.
And I want to make it, how can we get it?
Right.
Now, that's the type of thing that you might want to get the Gilderland Public Schools to sponsor, getting into, again, the paperback that every kid could do it, and get somebody, put cartoons in it. You know, they all like their graphic novels type thing.
I know logistics is really difficult, but in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm going to Boston right now on the duck tours.
Yeah.
How could we get people to go to the Battle of Saratoga, Van Schaik Island, the Battle of Normanskill, and other, you know, I know logistically that's hard, but how could we create a,
The last meeting we had, we
so
talked
it's the
about,
passport.
the passport, which there was
Trail.
definitely the trail, and we have a program that, with the county, we do the Albany County Craft Beverage Trail, where you can like download something on your phone, and you can do a trail for craft beverages. You go to the breweries, you get a pass. So,
Jack's point?
but then if you, well, we would, because we're with the tourism, you know, then we would have some kind of collateral that could go with it. But we also love the idea of, I still think that passport, that paper passport, the stamp. So there's a technical thing we can do, and I think to your point, I just think that physical something could be really fun.
Well, I think what each of you has said also touches on pillars that we tentatively discussed last time. One, you know, that in terms of a legacy, leaving a legacy, not just a written, but perhaps a physical legacy, whether it's a physical place or it's some sort of connection of the things that are already out there, but just may not have been, connected in a way that is relevant to people today, that they can, on their terms and sort of meet people where they are and introduce the various things. And also that touches on another theme, which is sort of connecting groups that are all doing really good work in their respective sort of silos, but perhaps having an umbrella that ties those things together. And the last sort of pillar that I think was touched on is economic development. Right? That was one of the major themes of the legislation. That we want to finally, or get a start on the idea of really tapping into what is there in Albany County in a way to drive economic development. Not just for academics, not just for history nerds, but ways that can really drive meaningful economic growth, be it through heritage tourism or what have you.
I mentioned we need more people involved than the official number. Maybe subcommittees. If you had a subcommittee, and the subcommittee was Guilderland, and they decided they were going to focus on the battle of the Normanskill, which is the only real battle we had in what is now Albany County, at least. A subcommittee could concentrate on it. There would be something in probably Towasantha Park where people can park and read a sign if we get a decent sign. Some of them got a couple of nice signs that have gone downtown Albany in recent years, down on Broadway, instead of just the cast iron, nowadays cast aluminum sign that it's a hint of what's there and certainly doesn't tell the whole story. And there's a couple of nice ones down on Broadway, both North Broadway and down across from the campus. If you wanted a decent sign, probably at Towasantha Park, just because you can park and wander around, not get hit by a car doing it. And then have a date where you wanted to have something in the way of a family picnic where people could come in, some comments. Maybe you could anticipate a more academic conversation where you bring in a speaker, probably at the Guilderland Public Library, and talk about the people there and the people who are involved in it and why this was important, and this was the reality of the war actually coming into your backyard, et cetera, et cetera. And if you had a group that just concentrated on that and involved others, it would give them a chance to come up with a great product. And what the function of the commission would be to say this is a legitimate function that we are endorsing and encouraging and hopefully trying to fund and help people to fund to it.
I think that's a really good point. And you mentioned the bicentennial celebration.
Yeah.
That was so significant at a national level that sort of filtered downward so as to stimulate activity at the localist level, at the town and village level, right? I know there was a Town of Guilderland bicentennial committee, right? That's not the case with this, right? So there's sort of a vacuum in that, and I don't see any level below us really probably organizing at least at a jurisdictional level to observe. So that sort of, to your point, I think it gives us both the opportunity and the responsibility to sort of be a prod, a support, an umbrella to the local groups that are out there, and perhaps provide a framework in which they might wind up doing something,
right.
In which, but for us, the 250 may have gone by without something local in the town of Westerlo or City of Waterville.
And you'd have some people saying it's all over by then. Because it happened after the Battle of Saratoga, or certainly after the...
Right. But I like that vision of sort of what our job would be, in relation. And it also, again, taps into the idea of, we're not reinventing the wheel. There's a lot of really good history, going on.
I have two questions. One is, question, comment. One is, I was doing something and looking at, so Rensselaer County just became Rensselaer County in 1791. Prior to that, it was Albany County 2. And I'm wondering to what degree our celebration should encompass the fact that Saratoga and Rensselaer County were really ours.
We were like the mother of counties, right? Like Virginia was the.
I think we should show up with a smile on our face and not pay for anything in any of those counties, and just wish them well and shake hands with them, because we'll get spread so thin.
That's right.
Because technically, the Battle of Saratoga was in Albany County.
That's right. That's right.
You know, and that's.
Well, and the danger is if we don't do our job well, we'll be outshone by our offspring. Right.
That's right. That's well put.
My other comment was, in the museum community, this stuff's been kicking around for easily a year. They produced, the American Association of State and Local History came out with this book called Making History at 250. And then there was a state gathering that came out with a state commemoration guide. And I don't know if that's something, but I brought copies for everybody, so I don't know.
Has the governor had the
question.
first meeting of the state? That's one of the other problems.
Yeah, that's another.
It's the next week or two, is what they were saying. So the commission, the state commission was formed, I don't know who's on it, and they're supposed to be meeting. They kept saying at the NICEA conference in the next week or two, real soon, so.
Jack, your mention of, like a graphic novel or cartoon,
Yeah.
with a book, it got me thinking, I wonder if either as part of a passport program or part of a, educational program for schools in conjunction with the book, I wonder if we could do, mini videos. I'm thinking of a Schoolhouse Rock type, but maybe a little bit,
Which they did
less
in the bicentennial.
Okay, maybe a little less kind of school-based than that, but that same concept, with a narrator or something, that could look at a number of these aspects. A short one about various battles, various personalities and people, whether that's part of a classroom piece. Or, as I said, the passport, you could put a QR code at some of these sites, because what's, other than the Battle of Saratoga, which is obviously a tourist draw and has programming and stuff there by itself, what absent an event, which can't, isn't a bad thing, but, can be time consuming, costly, is you're putting all resources in one day or one weekend, what could be a draw to some of these sites absent a big produced, kind of event? So maybe a dozen of these videos as we select kind of notable things, people, events, and when it's in conjunction with a site, a QR code, maybe part of the passport, something that I love. I'm sure a lot of us love the symposium idea, and I think that would be great. So this is not in exclusion to that, but in addition, kind of informing Joe Q public who may have a cursory interest, but is not going to attend a symposium, but has some level of curiosity in something short and engaging.
And delivering the information in a format that's relevant to today's, particularly today's kids, right? I mean, I know my kids,
But to Paul's point,
So
too,
subliminal inspiration, right?
and it's that media also, Paul was saying, can bring forth the personalities too.
Yeah,
It can be
absolutely.
a person, it can.
Absolutely. And not disagree, in fact, totally agreeing with that observation, but also going back to your point about, some takeaway, some written product. It's interesting, I bet if you went into the sort of personal archives of most houses in Albany County, the grandmothers and people sort of stored away things, you'll find the Knickerbocker News when Kennedy was assassinated.
Yeah.
The Times-Union when we walked on the moon, and the special insert that the Times-Union did on the tricentennial. Right. Of course, I'm cataloging exactly what was in my grandmother's.
Yeah.
Right? And I raise it because those I know that newspapers are not what they were, but delivering that kind of history in a easy to comprehend 4-page insert that is literally inserted into a mass publication. Like I said, it's proven itself worthy by the fact of how many of those things were saved, for future whatever, for future history nerds to discover in the attic, right?
Yeah.
But I totally, I think the onus is on us to, whatever we do it in a technological means
Yes.
that is highly relevant.
This is their library.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, I'm just thinking, if I hear a news clip or read a story about, some new technology or medicine that I might have a level of curiosity about, but absolutely no knowledge, I could read a dense report and spend all that time and come away, not knowing much more. Or I'll go to YouTube and I can find a quick 2 or 3 minute engaging explanatory video. A little level of entertainment maybe, but something digestible, and then I walk away hopefully knowing a little bit more.
Could I make a suggestion that perhaps between now and our next meeting, maybe if we can circulate amongst ourselves sort of if we could write up what we think the sort of the pillars should be, so that we can kind of cross-pollinate and then arrive at a consensus as to, we've identified some here, ones that we haven't talked about that are personally important to me, that it be, whatever we do is broadly inclusive, right?
Yeah.
That we tell the Native American story, the African American story, right? And again, Albany County is uniquely positioned in that respect, right? I mean, I was thinking this morning, you could make the argument that excluding New York because they were occupied and loyalist, Albany was probably the most diverse colonial city at the time of the Revolution, right? So, but how did that impact things, right? What was the position of the Dutch to American independence vis-a-vis the English in Albany, or the free African Americans, right? I mean, Boston didn't have those issues, didn't have those, which are not problems. I think they're very interesting, right? So that's very unique to us. So that sort of inclusiveness and comprehensiveness. We talked about economic development. We talked about leaving a legacy. And again, things that are unique to Albany County. Right? The bicentennial, I don't remember there being, of course I was young, but any particular local. It was very much, Boston, Lexington, Concord,
That's
Philadelphia, big ships in New York, right? I don't remember there being anything that was relevant to what we did, right?
Don't forget the Freedom Train.
The Freedom Train, right? Bob Lanier size 20 sneaker.
That was.
Remember the Freedom Train?
Yeah, that was.
It's from the Nans, I think.
Yeah, that was, the guy in charge of it was Mike Connors.
Okay.
Who was in his young 20s and wildly enthusiastic and went all over doing that.
But if we could, and I'll certainly circulate my list, and then we can kind of synthesize so that when we do have the full complement, we're then in a position to say, these are the pillars that we want to focus on. I would like to spend a little bit of time on resources. You had mentioned underwriting, which I think is very important, and I totally agree that the underwriting for projects is more realistic and easier than underwriting for just a concept.
They also like exclusivity, so that contributing along with your competitors, there's no glory in that one, but being the only one, if you're one of the Dakes and the Stewart stores decided to pick up something, I know they do that. They have their own foundation on it. And they'll be doing a lot of it in Saratoga County. It's already been mentioned, what would you like us to do? But that type of thing where somebody would like to get credit. I remember when I wrote my book, when it first came out, it was way back in 81, there was a jewelry store that wanted a full-page ad that they had to pay for that ad. They knew they were going out of business. They wanted that to live in the book, and I would insist that it got reprinted every time because we kept adding new chapters, and they said, "We'll get rid of that." No, it's got to stay in there because that was their legacy.
Motivation.
That was their legacy.
It's interesting. Well, we know we have, some modest amount of sort of seed money, or that I would characterize as seed money from the county itself in creating this commission. Do we want to view that as complete, or do we want to view that as seed? In which case, using that to see if we can't do what it takes to get ourselves in a position to raise.
Well, we may
that
want to
plus.
look at what's going on in the next county budget that begins on the 1st of January. We might
Right.
want to take a look at that and figure out where would we need money in just that 1 year, for example.
Joe, I'm looking at, I'm sorry, the minutes, we're looking at like $20,000?
I think that's what it was originally, yeah.
Didn't we just spend that just in our discussion?
Yeah, I think it depends on what we think we want to do,
Yeah.
and that will dictate to us whether this is seed money or whether that's the end of it.
How
Yeah.
much do we have budgeted again?
15 from the county.
15.
And you had mentioned 5 as a possible
Well, that's why I have
hospitality
to kind of,
grant or whatever.
yeah, I have to figure out how the grant programs are working, since it's going through our education foundation
Yeah.
and how that would go, but.
And realistically, let's say we can go back to the county for another 15. But I don't think we would want to think of $30,000 as being exhaustive. So
Yeah.
we shouldn't be thinking just in terms of this is going to
Sure.
be a county-funded exclusively. And I also think, to the extent that we are successful in leveraging whatever we have to start with private money, we actually wind up positioning ourselves in a better position to get more from the county, right? Because we've proven
We
ourselves
could
adept.
also provide matching funds, or,
Yeah.
and spread it a lot thinner than it would normally be.
Yeah.
Any of these things that we've talked about so far, are tangible, either, hard copy or digital, and would be designed to have eyeballs on them. I think those, focusing on pursuing, some level of sponsorship, especially on the corporate side, if you're looking at, kind of eyeballs and products. I think anything outside of that is perhaps where, county dollars or Discover dollars, that may be less appealing just from the kind of independent sponsorship side, and kind of putting those together and, seeing where gaps may be if we need to be a little bit more creative and original in terms of resources makes sense. But those, like you said, Jack, some of these seem like the low-hanging fruit type options for corporate sponsorships, and not just the eyeballs, but it's a way for some of the traditional regional or county companies to kind of be part of the celebration and the recognition in the process.
I would agree that it would seem to be low-hanging fruit, but I also think that even with low-hanging fruit, you got to have someone who knows how to pick it.
Sure.
And we talked about, reaching out to other entities within the county, sort of shared resources, which we should do. But I do know there's no one really in the county that is professional at going out and raising, corporate funds for things. That's a pretty specialized art and profession. So I raised the question of, do we initially want to see if we can reach out to the people in that community to see if they would be willing to help us in a, ideally pro bono type basis. Go to the people that know how to do a nice graphic presentation. I don't know whether I may be.
Yeah,
we haven't
haven't worked with like real corporate high-end sponsors like.
You guys are about as close as in terms of going out and actually, shaking the money tree, but.
Yeah.
But just put it out there. Would that be an appropriate first step for us to, sort of contact the media logics or the professional companies that put together, prospectuses and packages and have strategies for going out and.
Oh, I'd like to see for our next meeting, if we talk about those pillars or areas of concentration, if we've made a commitment that we don't want this to be like 76, where you have 1 year and it's over and it's done with. The same thing happened with 86 with the city charter. The big buildup, it's over, it's done with, and that's it. Whereas we have a mandate from the county legislature and signed by the executive that we're going to celebrate the entire American Revolution, and not take 1 point or even 1 year. And maybe we should do some thinking. What would you do if you had to do 1 or 2 very significant things that would stay in people's minds and would remind them of the importance of the American Revolution? It could be in architecture, it could be in signage, it could be in publications, it could be in academics. Siena College for years, on every June when the kids would go, they would have a World War II celebration. And people would come in, and Professor Kelly would start it, and I don't know how he would do it. Maybe 1 year that would be more on the causes and what happened, and then move it all the way through to the end of World War II. So for a period of years, in that entire big event, World War II, he had a whole series of seminars going on. We too could start, whether we like it or not, with the memories of Lafayette coming to Albany in September, in our case, of 24, and all the way to the Treaty of Paris. What things would we do to remind people throughout that period, not just of one event, especially one event that occurred someplace else, like the Declaration of Independence, but were important to the people in Albany County then and today?
So am I correct in understanding you're saying that we should focus, particularly at our next meeting, on establishing sort of the pillars with an idea of some of the specific executables?
I think we all have different ideas on it. You have to think about it and discuss it. But I was going to talk about this later. I might as well talk about it now. Wednesday, there was at the Bethlehem Library, the local Bethlehem Historical Society sponsored a lecture on Selkirk. Who's Selkirk? What do you know about Selkirk? Most people don't know where it is. It's in Bethlehem, but it's sort of in Queens as well, in that general area. It's also a dot on the map with a little hamlet. James Selkirk is a Scotsman. They know the village he's from. He comes over. They know what boat he came over. He came here as a young man, a teenager. Apparently he had family, friends around. And he wound up managing to be in almost every possible battle of the American Revolution, whether it was Morristown, whether it was Saratoga. Yes, it was Yorktown. And the group that he was with most of the time was what was called Congress's own. So everybody else is the New York such and such. Everybody has a name. Why are they Congressman's own? Because officially they're the Canadians. And they're all the people that we picked up when we went and invaded Canada. How many people know that Schuyler was up there and that we owned for a while St. John and Montreal and damn near had Quebec? And we got an awful lot of people who were French Canadians who wound up joining the American Army, most of them militia going up from various states, and then had to bail out.
Did they come back with us?
They came back with us.
I didn't know that.
And by I did. I'm so glad, because I know you followed this, that you didn't know about it. What happened with Selkirk, he eventually survived, and a lot of them didn't, with this Canadian regiment, believe it or not. And he was a sergeant, and he's one of only 1 or 2 people that actually wrote his memoirs. And the memoir is in the hands of a family that are now living in Rochester, handwritten. It's 80% not his own work, and he doesn't hide that so that people understand what's going on. But 20% of it is his memories of being an enlisted man. And it's kind of horrendous what he went through. And it's 240 handwritten pages. And a scholar has worked on this. He's from Fordham. and they would love to have it published. It's all been translated, and mercifully, his handwriting is beautiful. He wrote it from basically 1800 until 1818, and he died in 1820. He married a girl that had come over on the same boat, somewhat younger than he, but he knew who she was, from Scotland. And her maiden name was Henry, and the Henrys owned land in the town of Bethlehem. And that's how, after the war, when he married her, which was after the war, he wound up in Bethlehem. He was a tailor by profession, trained, he ran a little store for a while down there, and everybody was a farmer on the side there, no matter what they did. It's a great story. I didn't know it.
No idea.
I certainly didn't know, and by a strange coincidence, I went down to the convention that we had. I went to the breakfast because I wanted to listen to the talk on the head of tourism. And then I was going to stop in and see my friend here, and I said, I can't wait to get in and hear your presentation. I never did. So I wound up talking to an architect who was asking me as county historian if I knew anything about the Frenchman that he mentioned, which is his ancestor. And so I did research on it. He was in that Canadian regiment. He was a personal friend of Schuyler. He wrote letters to George Washington, whom he knew. He stayed in Albany, and he was stuck with all these refugees that came down from French Canada that had their land taken because they weren't loyal to the crown. And up until 81, when the governor knew it was all over, said, okay, amnesty, you can all come back now. But they all lost their land. They never got it back. And
did they physically return to Canada?
Yeah,
Even though they
they did. And the way that this fellow was involved is he went to Washington. He said, I see with this Treaty of Paris that your government is going to pay the Tories for the loss of their land. Well, guess what happened to me? I left French Canada, and they took my land. Can we include those people? Many of us are now living in the United States. Can we get repaid from the same thing? It never did happen. But there's a letter that the family has that Washington says, I will send this to Secretary Knox, who was the commissioner. He's the head of war at that time, Secretary of War, or the equivalent. And they never did get. But that story came on Monday. The one that I went to just to find out where they got the name Selkirk one came on Wednesday. And these people would like to print that. That's a hell of a thing, and it's so relevant because all of the works that are written by officers and educated people, and it's beautiful. His spelling is no worse than anybody else at that time, but his printing is beautiful, or his handwriting. And he left. He had one daughter and something like 9 sons. And at the end of this talk, they said, would anybody here who's a descendant stand up? And they had about 6 or 8 people, most of them still live in Selkirk. And, that's a hell of a local story, but a very important national story. And it's ours. It's Albany County's story. And that kind of thing could be focused on at some point too.
Yeah, I think when I was talking about focusing on personalities, I think that's a good example.
Yep.
It makes it real in a way that battles, they're important, they're flashy, but they're kind of cerebral in a way. And this makes it very personal.
I like the way we do the Schuyler Mansion now, that instead of hiding the black history, they've just embraced it and rediscovered it. And when you walk in, there's one of the computerized people there, and it's a heavy-set Irish American or African American who is obviously the manservant of who's ever at the mansion, and is very close, and actually begged Mrs. Schuyler to please enslave him because he was taken as a prisoner of war because he was a servant to one of the officers. And he said, you know, I'll starve. I have no clothing. I won't take me into your, basically make me enslave me, but make me part of the Schuyler household. And he wound up in a position of importance with all those limitations. It's a hell of a story. It's a local story, and it's something that makes you open up your eyes and wonder what's going on. But Schuyler Mansion did that. They did it with their reenactment, with their discovery, and so on. I mean, we can take. I remember reading when we did not have a book on Albany, and the closest one was 1936, and in the back there's no ethnicity at all. Only blacks are slaves, and they're mentioned rather minimally, and no ethnicity is mentioned. And if you take, neither is religion. This is a generation that was obsessed with their religion in their lives, in their neighborhood, and so on. And if you want to look up Lutheran, for example, it's a piece of architecture, because we just avoid that issue, and everybody is generic, and most of them are overwhelmingly white male. So we have lots of publications, but we don't have one that a kid could read and say, yeah, this is my people.
I sort of see you and raise you on that,
Yeah.
on that point. If you look at the past history, like Howell and Tenney, or I don't know,
Yeah.
Richmond, their landmark history of Judge
Yeah.
Massa Parker's landmark history of
Yeah.
Albany from the 1890s, they all start as if the world, you know, and Adam and Eve started in 1609.
Yeah.
The only reference they make to the fact that, you know, the native peoples were here was always later on in the context of some other little story.
Sure.
There was no, you know, so to the extent to which we appreciate, and even to the extent that we have some bandwidth to understand that this was native territory to begin with, we have become so, I'm on a soapbox now, but we've become so Iroquoisized in our understanding of history that we think, oh yeah, Iroquois, the wigwam over at the state capitol, that it must have been, the Mohawks, right? We were Mohawks. You know, so I mean, if there's any group that has been shortchanged over the history, it's the Mohican people in Albany County, and the extent to which we, you know, have absolutely no concept or understanding.
Yeah.
You know, not only were they here before us, but they were here for 10 times as long as we have been here, right? The Hudson was, you know, their world, right? And we just sort of, you know, have glossed it all.
We have opportunities. We can tell the same story that was told time and time again, and put in all those missing parts that are going to make it a much more complete and a much more enjoyable story.
And you're right, and on the Mohicans in particular, relevant to this group, they aligned with us.
Yeah.
You know, they were on. I knew that the Oneidas.
So did the Oneidas.
Yeah, I knew that.
And then we said,
but I didn't know the
no,
Mohicans were.
It's a confederacy. Take it all.
Right. But that was, I didn't know that at all.
Yeah.
And they, you know, they were not loyal, but they aligned with the Americans, right? So I mean, they did everything they were supposed to do. They did everything right. They did everything. You know, they were friendly to us when we arrived. They stuck by us, and we just, you know, totally screwed them. You know, from beginning. But anyway, but this is an opportunity.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity in a small way to, you know, right the record, I guess. So I think, going back to your previous points about, you know, focusing on the pillars, perhaps populating that with a couple of specific ideas for executions, and am I correct to understand that then will help inform fundraising? Because we then would have at least some concepts that might be easier. And I know we're coming to the end of our time, but we use the tricentennial and the bicentennial as guides in things that were done there that we would like to perhaps replicate or emulate. One thing that I would feel is that were big in both of those things, particularly the tricentennial, that I just don't think is probably within our purview, which sort of the big public mass events, right? Whether it's the tricentennial gala or whatever, those just intimidate the heck out of me, right? And I think we've identified none of what we've talked about here, all really interesting, good, worthy, valid legacy type things. We haven't touched on, what about the party, right?
Yeah.
Which is fine by me, because I just think, throwing a big party is a lot of work. Now, that having been said, I would leave that slightly open, because, the fundraisers may say, but that's what people want to support.
So we're, Discover Albany got ARPA money for the Halloween festival, and so there was existing programs that we had. We got some funding to augment, and then a lot of folks from the community were like, but what about the parade? And I was like, what about the parade? Like, we're only a small organization, and there's some community members after the first year have been like, okay, we're gonna do it. So I don't know if anything will come of it, but there is like a community group who said, okay, we saw what you did, we want to do this. So there is, with the idea of momentum as well, is like, look, this is what we can do, but what else do you want to see? And hopefully, you never know. But
out at Lafayette Park, there's a little plaque and it says, George Washington marched this way, and it came through the area, and that suggests to me that it's suggestive of a parade. And maybe this is a group that we ought to have some keep track of what they're doing, and maybe even support it in some way if we can augment it and maybe make it something that could be a bigger thing.
Yeah, there could be something out there that if they just had a little more,
Right.
maybe it could be the anchor for something else.
Right, but something that's sort of self-initiated in the community that
Yes.
we might
Yeah.
support and encourage, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I agree with that.
And the same thing with the parade. We have 2 parades a year, 3 if you count St. Patrick's. And if somebody wants to make it a whole theme, fine.
Mm-hmm.
Same committee can do it. They can do it all by themselves, and we can help them with it, encourage them, but
Yeah.
I don't have to run it.
Right.
And
I
I
just-
don't need a separate parade.
I was part of the Schenectady Bicentennial in 1998, and it was a lot of work, and it was all about a big parade.
Yeah.
It was a lovely parade, but in retrospect, I think
What's left?
the parade was over, we all went home, and,
It's also finding what's authentic too. So the Erie Canal Bicentennial is next year, and the Seneca Chief boat, which was, I'm going to misquote, but I think they rebuilt it in Buffalo or somewhere. But it's going to sail Buffalo, yeah. So it's going to sail here. It's going to
great.
different places. It will dock in Albany, and then they want the event there. But there's that's the piece that's coming, and they're saying, we have this. How can we help? And then. That's where we're kind of finding those partners to come to the riverfront. So
Yeah.
I think it's looking for those opportunities as well. Is there, unfortunately, Tall Ships is coming. It's called Sail Forth, if you want to Google it. So the Tall Ships is going to be in New York City. We couldn't find a dock to bring some of them here. But maybe that's something, if anyone can think of any other solutions. I think we talked to the port. We just couldn't figure out. Some of them wanted to keep coming, but...
Could we get them to Queens? The new port in Queens?
I don't know. I think that's what we got to find out. But I think those are the things too. If we know, something really cool is happening in this municipality,
Plug in.
how do we keep coming?
Find a way to plug into it.
Okay, good. Well, unless there's any other, and so our objective for next meeting is to have a almost full
And
complement.
Hopefully fill the vacancy.
Exactly. Hopefully have
If we
someone
do find
propose.
somebody, we could probably get that same resume if it looks good and seems to fill that geographic void that we don't have.
Yep.
And send it out so there could actually be a vote when you got here.
I think that's
Yeah.
a good objective. And then in the meantime, sort of the homework will be to circulate amongst ourselves sort of our ideas of
Yeah.
pillars, and even if you want to populate with some specific executions, I think that might be
Could
good
somebody,
conversation starters.
could somebody send us the email, the name, address, and email of everybody here.
We can do that.
Pat.
Yeah, Pat, we'll ask Pat to
Yeah.
do that.
From time to time, we might find something with real paper or something to send to.
Right.
An address.
I'm with you.
too.
Great. Anything else that anybody wanted to? Good boy.
Well, we can just, I know it was in the minutes from before, that apparently the state hasn't initiated anything yet.
But is there news on that?
Yeah, as they were saying, as of just a couple weeks ago, they named people. I've tried Googling all over, to find who it is, and then at this tourism meeting, they said, and they're gonna be meeting in a couple weeks, so that's all I got. If anyone else has better Google skills.
Is there some way we can get a sense of what the other counties are doing? The counties around us that are,
Saratoga was very open. It was Discover Saratoga who I spoke
Yeah.
to, and it did seem to make sense that at some point, because people are gonna be driving Albany to Saratoga to connect with them, to make sure we're complimentary, but they're well ahead of the game on
Yeah,
us.
the commissioner, Roberts, is very good, and the battlefield. There's-
Washington County has, or is already posting things on their Facebook. We talked about if we wanted a social media presence. I did ask Discover Albany. They said if the county, we'd be happy to host, because we have a social media team. But yeah, Washington County's posts are actually pretty good.
Yeah, as are Westchester and
Yeah.
Dutchess as well.
And Dutchess.
Good.
and
That's
Wa-
probably, that's how I just kind of did a Google for,
Yeah.
put the county name in
Yeah.
and 250
They
and
did.
figured,
Long Island just released a seal for their commission. So, yeah, but I
you mentioned, that reminds me of the, sort of an unfinished conversation. How do we feel about reaching out either individually or to like graphic artists or firms who we think might have the requisite wherewithal on some of the things we want to do? Or do we want to wait until we sort of
I'd
figure
I'd
out?
wait.
because
That's
we
fine.
might be able to Discover Albany, depending on what's on our,
Perfect.
we might be able to do
Okay,
a
that's
lot
good.
of that.
That's good.
But I don't want to overpromise poor Katie.
At our last meeting, we did set the next meeting, we set this meeting, so shall we do that again for sometime in May?
After Tour Fest.
After Tulip Fest, yeah.
And if you want to see a really nice, small-town American parade, come to the Altamont Memorial Day Parade, which is May 19th. It's always the Sunday before Memorial
I
Day.
used to do both of that and then.
Well, it's a great story, because it went away during COVID, and then it didn't come. It was sponsored by the village, and then it went away, and put together a citizens committee, and it's better than it ever was.
Oh,
So,
that's
Yeah.
great.
yeah. So you're all invited. Does anyone have any days that are absolutely out? Any big vacations or anything? Of course, I don't have my
I don't have it on.
if we're due at 11, I can't do the 13th, 15th, or 17th of May. So other than that, I've got some flexibility.
Why don't we look at the next week, because that'll give us about a month.
Yeah.
What's that Tuesday of
21st.
Tuesday the 21st work?
Should work
Yes.
with me. I should join this 21st century. Piece of paper.
See, I've-
Is it 11
Great.
o'clock again?
That works for me. Hold on, bud, we're almost done. Oh, that's okay. Great. Well, thank you.
Okay. 21st.
See you all next month.
Yeah.